What's going on, everybody? Thank you for coming to watch. I've got you guys an update on the latest information that we have on this big-time severe weather outbreak that we're expecting this weekend, and also this potential tornado threat that we're going to be dealing with in the Pacific Northwest tomorrow. So let's go ahead and dive right into it. But before we do, make sure to like and subscribe, as it lets me know that you guys do enjoy this forecast and that I'm doing something right. So let's go ahead and get right into it by starting off with the SPC outlook here. This is the day one outlook. We have a marginal risk of severe weather in effect for sections of southeastern Oklahoma and northeastern Texas. And I will say we actually have been seeing some pretty significant hail and wind reports coming from portions of the DFW Metroplex. So if you are out here tonight, make sure that you are staying safe and that you have multiple ways to receive alerts, as we could be talking about some more hail and wind through the late nighttime hours. Now, as we move into tomorrow here, we have a slight risk of severe weather going out for portions of northwestern Oregon and western Washington, and this is driven by a 15% hatched hail threat. Now, this is a very rare thing to see as we go into the month of March. If we see something like this in September or October, it's still rare. So seeing this in the springtime is something that almost does not happen at all. Now, this is not only driven by a hail threat, although it is the biggest thing. We are going to be talking about the potential for a couple of brief spin-up tornadoes as well across the West Coast, specifically in areas like central and western Washington and Oregon. So if you are out here in these areas, make sure that you do have a tornado action plan in place. A live stream will come out if warranted. However, at this time, it's kind of iffy. Now, as we go into Thursday, we have multiple marginal risks of severe weather, one of them going out for portions of southern Texas here, but the more significant one going out for parts of the Midwest. Now, I would not be surprised to see a small slight risk of severe weather added in this region somewhere. However, at the moment, it is a pretty conditional threat, but it does look like we could be talking about some hail, wind, and maybe a brief tornado or two. Now as we go into the day 4 through 8 outlooks, we have a day 6 slight risk of severe weather, as many of you know by now, going from portions of the Midwest back down into Dixie Alley. If you're not already aware, this originally was much bigger whenever it was a day 7 outlook, and it was actually the largest slight risk ever issued on a day 4 through 8 outlook of all time. However, it has since been condensed significantly, but it is still a very large slight risk to see this far out. So if you are in any of these areas, make sure that you do have multiple ways to receive alerts this week. And again, this is Sunday, but as we go into Monday, we're going to have another potential threat for severe weather on portions of the East Coast, mainly looking like it's going to be a big-time damaging wind threat, but a couple of brief tornadoes certainly can't be ruled out either. Now, taking a look at the HRRR model here for our Pacific Northwest event, we could be talking about thunderstorms starting to fire as we go into the afternoon time hours tomorrow. This is around 3 p.m., alright, we're already seeing discrete supercells pop up into portions of northwestern Oregon, and in my opinion, this is the point where we're going to have the greatest chance to see a brief tornado or two while these cells are still discrete and they all have their own environment to work with. So if we were to see something, it would likely come from, again, like 3 to 5 p.m. After 5 p.m., this mostly becomes a big-time wind and hail threat, but again, that hail threat could be somewhat significant for portions of southwestern Washington, especially, I'd say. Now, as we go into midnight, we're going to see most of those thunderstorms enter portions of southern Canada, and the United States is not going to have to deal with that anymore, except for we're shortly going to see a low-pressure system bring many bands of heavy thunderstorms and snowfall to portions of the west coast, and that could potentially lead to some isolated flooding problems. If we take a look at the total precipitation forecast here from the HRRR, we can see, even though it hasn't picked up on the full event yet, we have areas reaching over 5 inches of rain in northern California and portions of western Washington and Oregon. So we are going to have to watch out for a flash flooding threat this weekend, potentially. Now, here's a sounding that was grabbed from portions of northwestern Oregon. We have the possible hazard type at tornado. We've got dew points sitting at about 56 degrees, but a significant drop-off in those dew points the higher up you go in the atmosphere, which is going to lead to a more significant hail threat, obviously. Speaking of hail, those analogs are insane. It has hail analogs up to 5 inches in diameter, which would be DVD-sized hail. Now, does that mean that we're going to see DVD-sized hail in this event? Absolutely not. It's only one analog, even noting that that's a potential. However, it is certainly something to watch out for, and in general, you should just take it as, hey, we're going to be dealing with a pretty significant hail threat. Now, you'll notice that we have about 50 to 55 knots of shear at the effective layer, which is going to be more than enough to support a couple of tornadoes. SRH values ranging anywhere from 150 all the way up to 300, so a little iffy on there. 3 Cape sitting at about 18, which usually wouldn't be enough. However, we are dealing with about 2,000 surface-based Cape in total, so we may have a better shot at seeing a tornado or two because of that. We're dealing with lapse rates sitting at about 7 to 8, which again is going to support more so of a significant hail threat than anything else, but it could also briefly increase our tornado potential across sections of Oregon and Washington. Now, our photograph here is not very impressive, but again, for this setup and for this time of year, it is something to note that we do have quite a bit of instability noted there in that photograph, considering this is quite literally Oregon. Now, here's a sounding taken for our event that we're expecting this weekend. This was taken from southwestern Missouri. Again, keep in mind this risk goes all the way from Ohio back down into Texas, so it's going to be impossible to take one sounding and tell everybody what they're going to see for this event. But it is worth noting that we do have a pretty impressive looking photograph there, decently textbook. We've got about 43 3 Cape, which is kind of just enough for a few tornadoes, maybe a brief strong tornado. SRH values range in this area in particular about 200. However, keep in mind, you're going to be able to find much better SRH values in other areas. Again, this was just the specific sounding that we took. We've got about 50 knots of shear at the effective layer, about 54 knots of shear at the cloud layer. Lapse rates at about 7 to 8, which again, just like with our Oregon and Washington event, could support a pretty significant hail threat. However, unlike our Oregon and Washington event, in this area in particular, we're actually going to be dealing with 3,000 surface Cape, which is obviously more than enough for us to see a few tornadoes touch down. Again, combine it with that wind shear, and we're talking about a pretty decent environment overall. We've got the effective layer STP at 2. Pretty impressive storm slinky there, curved at about 75 degrees. So overall, not a too terrible sounding. Now, as we take a look into the future here with the GFS model, we can see that we're going to be dealing with our event this weekend, obviously. But what we didn't know is that we could actually end up seeing a potential winter storm on the backside of it for portions of the Midwest and the upper Midwest, and potentially even intermittent blizzard conditions if winds are still elevated enough. Now, we're not saying that this is going to be anything like Winter Storm Blair, the most significant winter storm that impacted these areas this year, or any of the other blizzards that we've seen with these recent severe weather events. However, it could be somewhat significant given that we're now entering the month of April, and the Midwest typically doesn't see winter storms like this too often for this time of year. Now, after that, things get a little blurry as the GFS model starts to lose touch with reality. However, it has noted pretty consistently, along with a couple other models, that we could have a potential severe weather threat going from April 3rd into the 5th for portions of the Midwest and Dixie Alley, so that'll be something to look out for. But after that, it just becomes a bunch of hogwash. So, before we end off this video here, I would like to quickly thank all of our channel members. You guys are the best. We actually just posted a new members-only video today. It will be coming out on the main channel for everybody, but these guys got early access to it. So congrats to everybody that is a member. Again, you guys literally support me more than you could ever know. So huge shout out to all of those guys. As always, if you'd like to become a member, make sure to do so by clicking the link down in the description. You'll get access to several exclusive videos and also shout outs at the end of every forecast. But yeah, that's all I've got for you guys today. So if you guys did enjoy, make sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you all in the next one. Stay safe.